Ahoy there, my children of the Force. Welcome to Star Wars Transmission's weekly Q&A. I'm your boy Dan, and today we've got some excellent questions to dive into, so let's get right to it. So, for our very first question, this comes from me and only me, who asks, who were the Sith between the start of the Rule of Two and Plagueis and Palpatine? Love this question. Love starting off with the Sith. It's always great to discuss the Sith. But first, before we discuss the Rule of Two, the Sith, let me go back. Let me point out that my boy, me and only me's photo, their pic, is a pic of the Montreal Canadiens, and your boy is a diehard Rangers fan. So first and foremost, let's go Rangers, baby. And I'm looking forward to my blue shirts taking on the Canadiens. They play the Canadiens on March 9th, I think it is, the next time those two face off against each other. The Canadiens won the first game against the Rangers. The Rangers won the second game, so I'm hoping that the Rangers take the season series against the Canadiens. And of course, my boy Breadman. Got to get a photo of Breadman. All right, with that out of the way, let's dive into all of the canon Sith Lords that span all the way back from Darth Bane and when he created the Rule of Two up to Darth Sidious. So, obviously, we're going to start with Darth Bane, right? And I'm going to stick specifically with canon Sith Lord, so I'm not going to be discussing Legends continuity for this question. At the end, I'll kind of talk a little bit about Legends, but primarily we're just going to be focusing in on Darth Bane and the canon Sith Lords up to Darth Sidious. Okay, so starting with Darth Bane, he created the Rule of Two. Actually, let's go back for a second. Right, so Bane created the Rule of Two in 1032 BBY, so about a little more than 1,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, after the Jedi destroyed the weakened Sith Order. So it differs a little bit in canon how the Sith Order was destroyed as opposed to in Legends. So in canon, after the Jedi destroyed the weakened Sith Order during the Jedi and the Sith War, Darth Bane wound up being the sole survivor of that conflict, and then wound up creating the Rule of Two doctrine, which is a successor of the doctrine of the Dyad, which we kind of saw in The Rise of Skywalker. We learned a little bit about Dyad and Dyad of the Force, and that's where the Rule of Two in canon kind of comes from, is the doctrine of the Dyad. So Bane's Rule of Two doctrine dictated that there could only be two Sith Lords at any given time, right? A master that's going to represent the power of the dark side, and then their apprentice who's going to ultimately crave that power from their master and train under their master to hopefully fulfill their role and be able to take the title of Sith Master sometime in the future. The doctrine wound up governing the Lords of the Sith from that point all the way up to Darth Sidious, 1,000 years plus into the future. So now, Bane eventually took on an apprentice named Darth Zana. So we've got more information about Darth Zana in Legends than we do in canon. So we don't have a ton of information about Darth Zana in canon, but in Legends, Zana was a female. We don't know really much about Darth Zana other than the fact that she was Bane's apprentice. According to Star Wars Helmet Collection 2, which was released in 2016, although Jedi historical records were not accurate about the identity of Bane's apprentice or how Darth Bane died, it was rumored that Bane was killed on the inner rim planet of Ambria by Darth Zana in a duel, which is very similar to what transpired in the Darth Bane trilogy in Legends. In Legends continuity, Zana wound up dueling Darth Bane on Ambria. She killed him, and then she became the Sith Master, and she took an apprentice after that. And as far as canon goes, that's really all we know about Zana at that point. Knowing that Bane created the Rule of Two in, again, 1032 BBY, we can surmise that Darth Zana probably killed Bane sometime around 1000 BBY. Could be a little bit before, maybe a little bit after 1000 BBY, but I think it's a good ballpark date would be 1000 BBY, roughly is when Zannah probably murked Darth Bane. After Darth Zannah, the Rule of Two lineage is not very much ironed out. It gets hazy. There's a large gap spanning hundreds of years, where we basically have no clue who the Sith Lords were during that time. So we really don't know who the canon Sith Lords were for a large chunk of continuity within the current canon. So now the next Sith Lord that we know of in canon is Darth Plagueis' master, Darth Tenebrous. And let me make this a little bit larger. That's our boy Tenebrous. That's really the only image that you'll find of Tenebrous, or at least the only good image that you'll find of Tenebrous. He was a Bith, and at least in Legends he was a Bith. But here's what we know about Tenebrous in the current canon. Again, we don't know a ton of information about Tenebrous in the current canon. It was suspected that Tenebrous designed the scimitar, which was also known as the Sith's infiltrator, and the scimitar was the starship that we see Darth Maul using in the Phantom Menace. And that starship was officially designed by engineer and starship designer Wraith Sinar. So let's take a look at the scimitar. Here's the scimitar, which I love the design of the scimitar. It's such a ballin' ass design. It looks so dope. I remember seeing the scimitar for the first time in the Phantom Menace and was like, whoa, that is such a cool looking starship. And I love the fact that it's a starship, right? But there's only so much that you could do to make a starship look evil. But for some reason, to me, when I saw the scimitar in the Phantom Menace, I was like, yo, that starship looks evil, looks sinister. I love it. Now, in the current canon, some other bits of information that we know about Darth Tenebrous, is that the 26th Legion of the Sith Eternal Army was actually named after Darth Tenebrous, and it was referred to as the Tenebrous Legion, and that information comes from the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary. And so in the Rise of Skywalker Visual Dictionary, we learn that the Sith Eternal Army, their legions were named after various Sith Lords. And in doing that, in the Rise of Skywalker novelization, a lot of legend, especially ancient Sith Lords that were prominent in Legends or had more backstory in Legends, were actually reintroduced into canon. So I have conflicted feelings about the Rise of Skywalker, but one of the things that I do like about the Rise of Skywalker is that it did bring a lot of Sith Lords from Legends into the current canon, at least just so far as them having a Sith Eternal Legion named after them, which I think is pretty cool. All right. Aside from that, we currently don't know pretty much anything else about Tenebrous. We don't know when he was born. We don't know when he died. We don't even know his species. Again, this image is pretty much the only real legit image you're going to find of Darth Tenebrous. And this actually comes from the Darth Plagueis Legends novel. I believe it was, I can't remember if it was the book art or maybe some like official licensed art for that novel. But yeah, this is pretty much all you're going to find of Darth Tenebrous. In Legends, he was a Bith. In canon, we don't know what his exact species is. Now, most importantly, though, what we do know about Darth Tenebrous is that he was the master of one of my personal favorite Sith Lords, Darth Plagueis. I mentioned this in another Q&A. I'm a big fan of Darth Plagueis. We haven't gotten a ton of information in canon about Darth Plagueis, not nearly as much as we did in Legends continuity, but I love Darth Plagueis. He's still one of my favorite Sith Masters, and what we have gotten information wise with Plagueis in canon, I still think has been pretty cool. So at some point, Darth Plagueis most likely killed Tenebrous. We don't know how Tenebrous died. He could have just died of old age, but I don't think that's likely, right? In the Rule of Two era Sith, the apprentice is going to kill their master and take that title of Sith Master. So we can surmise, we can assume that Darth Plagueis killed Tenebrous, took the title of Sith Master, then took on our homeboy Sheev Palpatine as his apprentice, and those two began working together, sowing the seeds of corruption and getting the Clone Wars percolating, so that eventually Sidious will be able to topple the Republic and the Jedi. We all know the story, or the tragedy, I should say, of Darth Plagueis the Wise, right? So Sidious tells that story to Anakin in Revenge of the Sith, essentially telling Anakin, bro, I murked my master, right? So we know that Sidious killed Plagueis. We don't know the exact date that Sidious killed Plagueis. It would have happened sometime before 32 BBY, which is something I talked about in last week's Q&A. 32 BBY is the date of when The Phantom Menace takes place. And since Darth Sidious was officially the Sith Master in that film, and Darth Maul is officially the Sith Apprentice, since there could only be two Sith at that point in time in the current canon, Plagueis would have had to have been dead by the events of The Phantom Menace, which is a little bit different from Legends. And if you'd like to know more about how that differs, definitely check out last week's Q&A, because we discussed that at length last week, which was fun. Now, after Darth Maul, we know what happens, right? Darth Maul gets chopped in half by our boy Qui-Gon, and then basically is left to rot in a garbage planet, Lotho Minor, right? And then Sidious picks up a new apprentice, right? So he winds up taking on Darth Tyrannus, aka Count Dooku, as his apprentice. And then after that, of course, we got Darth Vader, who became Sidious's next apprentice. And even if, let's say, all went according to Sidious's plan, the Rule of Two would have ended with him. He was very much about trying to figure out how to live immortal, and he was planning to be the Sith Master for as long as he was going to live. So there was never going to be, at least in Sidious's mind, a continuation of the Rule of Two after him, because he, in his mind, was the pinnacle of the Sith, and he had accomplished the Sith Grand Plan, or I should say brought the Sith Grand Plan to fruition and toppled the Jedi. And then now just something to oh, I forgot about this photo. I love this image. This is from the Darth Plagueis novel. Here's Darth Maul, Darth Tyrannus. I love when I do that. I forget to go through these images that I got for you guys. Something to keep in mind, characters like Asajj Ventress, excuse me, not Savage, Savage Opress and Asajj Ventress, they were not part of the Rule of Two lineage. They were never Darth Sidious's apprentices, and as such, they were not a part of the lineage. Asajj Ventress was considered both a Dark Jedi and a Sith assassin. Savage Opress, he was going to be a Sith assassin for Count Dooku, and then obviously he became Darth Maul's apprentice. But those two were kind of like Sith Lords at that point. They were competing Sith Lords, but we know in the season 4, season 5 Clone Wars arc, the Mandalorian arc, where Sidious discovers that Maul survived from the events of the Phantom Menace and easily handles Maul. So Savage Opress was not a Sith apprentice. He was more of a Dark Jedi or a Sith assassin. All right. Now, in the current canon, that's pretty much all we've got as far as the lineage of the Rule of Two. So basically, from Darth Bane to Darth Zana, we have a very large gap in between Zana to Darth Tenebrous. And even Tenebrous, we don't know the exact date that he was born, but it was probably sometime during the High Republic. So we've got a very, very, very large gap in between that period from Zana to Tenebrous. So there's not a ton of canon Rule of Two Sith that we know about at this point. In the current canon, there's probably more ancient Sith Lords that we know about. So just some that I can think of: Darth Momin, Darth Caldoth, Darth Noctis, Ryan Nimbus, who was Darth Caldoth. I think he was Darth Caldoth, excuse me. His master, Darth Sanguis, Darth Revan is canon again. Darth Phobos, Naga Sadow. There's a ton of Sith. Like as I mentioned earlier, the Rise of Skywalker canonized Exar Kun, which is dope. Darth Endedu is canon again. So there's a lot of ancient Sith that we currently have in canon, but the Rule of Two era Sith, there's not a ton that we currently know about. My thought is that the upcoming series, The Acolyte, is going to show us and hopefully give us some information about that Rule of Two lineage. So we're going to learn, I don't know for sure, I think we're going to learn about the line of Darth Bane, the Sith that basically fill in that gap between Darth Zana to Darth Tenebrous. Because I think is it 80-something BBY is when the Acolyte takes place. It's at the very end of the High Republic. So we can be getting potentially Darth Tenebrous. We could be getting Darth Plagueis. And because of that, I think we're going to start to get more information about those characters. And I think we're going to learn more about the Sith and what they were doing all those years, those hundreds of years, almost basically 1,000 years of history that we don't know about. What were they doing in the shadows to basically corrupt the Republic and to work to topple the Jedi? Now, in Legends, the lineage, the Rule of Two lineage, is a little bit more filled out. It's a little less hazy. It still has some pretty significant gaps in it, but it's a little bit more filled out. We have some additional Sith Lords that we know about, and it's not a ton, but it's at least more than what we know about in the current canon. So in Legends, we had Darth Bane, Darth Zana, Darth Cognis, Darth Millennial, an unknown human Sith Lord, an unknown Deveronian Sith Lord, Darth Vectivus. Then there's a pretty substantial gap, but in roughly 500 BBY, there was Darth Gravid, then Darth Geen, who took on an apprentice, then another sizable gap before we got Darth Ramage, then another gap before we got the Sith Twi'lek Master of Darth Tenebrous, then Darth Plagueis, Darth Sidious, his apprentices Maul, Tyrannus, and Vader. So we get a little bit more information about that lineage in Legends, but there still is some sizable gaps in between some of those Sith Lords that we do get information about. Again, I'm hoping that in the near future, especially with the Acolyte, that we are going to start to get more information about the Sith. I find it hard to believe that Lucasfilm and Disney doesn't think that fans want this information, wants to know about these characters, wants to see stories about these characters and about some of these periods that we're talking about. Absolutely, I think Lucasfilm is aware of this, and that's why we're getting the Acolyte, which I am so excited about. I've mentioned it, I don't even know how many times now on the channel. The Acolyte is, bar none, the show that I'm most excited about for the upcoming Star Wars series. probably at this point, until we get announcements for other stuff, that's probably going to wind up being like my most hyped Star Wars content, or most anticipated, I should say, Star Wars content, probably for the foreseeable future, because I love the Sith, and the fact that we're getting a Sith-centric show is like right up my alley. If we got, the only way I think my excitement could be topped would be if we're getting a Sith trilogy of films, right? We're going to get a trilogy of movies. I saw some people mentioning this the other day in the some of my comments, or excuse me, some comments was, hey, what if we got like a Darth Bane trilogy of films? That would be super cool. If we got like a Revan trilogy of films, or some films focusing in on Revan and his life, that would be dope. Those would be projects that I would be so freaking excited about. But right now, The Acolyte is like top of my list, the Star Wars story that I'm most excited for, and that I'm probably going to wind up being the most excited for the near future. All right. Moving along. Sticking with the Sith. For our next question, Darth Tyrannus, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So Darth Tyrannus asks, who has a better jaw, Darth Malak or Darth Malgus? So for those of you who are unfamiliar with Darth Malak, Darth Malgus, they are currently Sith Lords from Legends continuity, and they're ancient Sith Lords. And so Malak appeared in the video game Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, and Malgus has appeared in the video game Star Wars The Old Republic and its companion novels, SWTOR. I played SWTOR for years, and I love the Star Wars The Old Republic companion novel, where we get to learn more about Malgus and his machinations and kind of what he was up to. Since I trained for years in Muay Thai and mixed martial arts, when I read this question, my first thought was immediately, oh, who has a stronger jaw? Who could take some serious strikes to the jaw, to their chrome dome, and not get knocked out? That's where my mind went first. So without a doubt in my mind, Darth Malgus. He for sure has a stronger jaw than Darth Malak. I think it's goes without saying, even though the prosthetic that he has over where his jaw is missing looks like it probably could withstand a little bit more damage. I think Malgus has a stronger jaw, and it would take a ton to drop my boy. It would take a lot to rock him. Malgus was a Sith Juggernaut, and a Sith Juggernaut is a class type in SWTOR. So when let's say you're playing Star Wars The Old Republic, you want to be a Sith, you could pick a couple of different Sith class types. Juggernaut would be one, and basically it's like a Sith warrior. It essentially is what it is. It's a Sith warrior, more or less. So Sith Juggernauts embodied the teachings of Marka Ragnos, charging into enemies with heavy armor and pure rage. And when you look at that's our boy Malgus on the left. When you look at him, you're like, yeah, that dude looks like he would just, if I encountered Malgus in the real world, I feel like he could just pick me up by my throat and just like crush me to death with ease. So yeah, 100% Malgus is totally gonna rock Malak's ass. He's gonna drop him. Malgus is an absolute beast. As far as who do I think has a cooler looking jaw, again, I'm sticking with Malgus. I think Malgus's jaw and that respirator, so to speak, that he wears is way cooler looking than Malak's. I think maybe not most, I think a lot of Star Wars fans that played Knights of the Old Republic first and may not have played Star Wars The Old Republic may be more inclined to say they like Malak more and his design more. I don't know. I like Malgus. I feel like Malgus's design looks super cool. Plus, I guess you could say the same thing. How the hell does Malak eat? Where is that dude getting his daily nutrition? allotment, his daily caloric intake. How is my boy getting vitamins? There's a vocabulator located somewhere there. I have no clue, but yeah, I like Malgus's design. So I think is it in the Old Republic comics? I can't remember. I think it's in the Old Republic comics. It's been some time. Revan basically judo chops Malik's jaw off with his lightsaber. So Malik's jaw just gets completely chopped off his face by Revan, which, talk about freaking brutal. Could you imagine getting your jaw like absolutely just chopped off from a lightsaber? Pretty brutal. So I will say that is something that is, I think Malik probably has an edge over Malgus as far as why they have to have that vocabulator respirator over their mouth. Malgus, essentially, the reason why my man's got that respirator on his chin or his jaw is from he encountered Bastila Shen in SWTOR. She jacked him up. She jacks his ass up, and she starts, I'm trying to remember, did she hurl boulders at him? I can't remember. It's been a hot minute since I've watched the cinematic for that clip and played SWTOR, but I think she might have used the Force to throw a bunch of rocks at his face and basically just absolutely decimate him. He also had, like, in that battle, he had a Republic trooper launch a grenade or blow him up essentially with a thermal detonator, and Malgus was able to stymie the effects of the thermal detonator with the Force, but that still like jacked him up. So again, our boy could take a freaking thermal detonator and survive. I'm pretty sure he could take some serious haymakers to the Chrome Dome and he will be fine. I'm probably biased because I love Knights of the Old Republic, but I love SWTOR. I played SWTOR for close to a decade. I loved that game. I loved the companion novels that came out for the game. I think there was like 5 or 6 companion novels that came out, and they're a lot of fun. And so I got to spend a lot of time with Malgus and his character. And yeah, you get to spend a lot of time with Malik in Knights of the Old Republic and in the Knights of the Old Republic comics. But I feel like you probably get to spend more time with Malgus in SWTOR and in some of the companion Star Wars The Old Republic novels. So I'm a little bit biased. I like Malgus. I think he's a pretty dope character. I've seen some people, maybe I'm wrong, I've seen people say that Darth Vader's armor is based off of Darth Malgus's armor. I haven't come across that in any Legends stories, but I could have missed it. I could be incorrect, but either way, Malgus definitely has like a Darth Vader vibe to it, especially in his armor and his respirator. So yeah, I think I'm going with Malgus. Malgus is my boy. When I was working on this question, I was like, dude, I want to go back and read those SWTOR companion novels. They're a ton of fun. The Revan novel is really cool. I would definitely recommend the Revan novel, especially if you're a fan of Revan and you haven't read that before. It's Legends, but hey, it still is a really fun novel. So if you haven't checked those novels out, give them a try because they're a lot of fun. Piff Lewis, welcome to the chat, my man. William Wade, welcome to the chat. Glad you guys are here. Talking Sith. All right, so let's move on to our next question. We're sticking with Sith. I love that we got some Sith-heavy questions here. So Coda Nova Coda asks, would you rather be a dark Jedi or a Sith? So when I read that question, my first thought was, 100% Sith, like without question. But then the more I started thinking about it, I was like, yo, maybe not. So in canon, let's make this image a little bit bigger. I thought this image is so dope. In canon, a dark Jedi was a Force sensitive who devoted themselves to the dark side of the Force, but they were not Sith nor members of the Inquisitorius. So as I mentioned before with Asajj Ventress, she was considered a dark Jedi. She was considered a Sith assassin as well. You can make the argument that Maul could have been considered a dark Jedi after he was no longer Darth Sidious's apprentice. Savage Opress probably is going to be considered a dark Jedi as well. So we've gotten dark Jedi in canon. Asajj Ventress has been the big one. I'm kind of making some assumptions with Maul and with Savage Opress. But hey, if Asajj Ventress is going to be considered a dark Jedi, I think we can make the argument that Savage Opress, Maul, they could probably be considered dark Jedi. I think Malicos from the game Jedi Fallen Order, he would be considered a dark Jedi, like a fallen Jedi that now is devoted to the dark side. I think he would be considered a dark Jedi. So as it stands in the current canon, basically the main difference between Sith and dark Jedi were that the Sith were basically an actual religious organization, a religious entity within the Star Wars galaxy. They were an order of dark side force wielders devoted to the dark side, and the dark Jedi were just merely devotees of the dark side of the force, and they were not organized really in any way outside of that. So they were not an organization or anything like that. They were just, hey, I'm a dark side force user. I'm devoted to the dark side of the force. So that's how you could think of them. That's how you can kind of separate the two, is someone that is just a devotee of the dark side and worships, or utilizes the dark side of the force, as opposed to the Sith, who they worship the dark side of the force, and they're a religious organization. So I say that because that helped me make up my mind. Because originally, again, my thought was, oh, dude, 100% I'm going to be a Sith. But then the more I thought about it, I'm like, yo, I could be a dark side force user and I don't have to adhere to any doctrines, any dictates or mandates set forth by the Sith. I could just do my own thing. And that to me is almost like, yo, that makes a dark Jedi even more badass than a Sith, because you're literally just doing whatever you want, whenever you want. Your life is devoted to the dark side and utilizing the dark side of the force, but you are not being handcuffed by the Sith religion. Now, granted, the Sith religion is very much about, hey, doing whatever you can to obtain power, living life the way you want to, killing anyone you want. So really, it's kind of the same thing. But think about the rule of two, right? There could only be two Sith at any point in time. I don't want to say that it's limiting, but it could potentially be. And if I'm a dark Jedi, I don't have to worry about having a Sith Master. I don't have to worry about having an apprentice. I could just go off and do my own thing, do whatever the hell I want. So the more I started thinking about it, the more I'm like, yo, I think I might want to be a dark Jedi. And again, that you would have asked me this prior, would have said, no way, I'm going with the Sith. Now, in Legends, dark Jedi appeared more frequently. They appeared way more often. And while they were force sensitives, they were frequently former Jedi who chose to deny the light side of the force or follow the dark side. And although dark Jedi originally referred to a Jedi had fallen to the dark side, it could also refer to uninitiated force sensitives who received no Jedi training at all, but then began their dark side careers, we'll say, as dark Jedi. And then others who were simply just dark side users who did not follow the teachings of the Sith. The term dark Jedi was actually coined by my boy Timothy Zahn for his Legends novel, Heir to the Empire. And it was a label that was used for a Jedi that had fallen to the dark side, as the term Sith at that point in 1991 had yet to be officially defined. And when I was reading this, I thought this was really cool. So according to Zahn, the term Dark Jedi became somewhat, to use his terminology, somewhat squishy, and for this reason was essentially discouraged by, I'm assuming, Lucasfilm or George Lucas from being used, because my guess was at that point George Lucas was probably starting to put together the framework for the prequel trilogy, right? Phantom Menace came out in 99. So 91, about 8 years off. It wouldn't shock me if at that point George Lucas was starting to put together the early stages of the prequel trilogy and was starting to define things like the Sith, the Rule of Two, that sort of stuff. So it makes sense to me that in 91, yeah, Lucasfilm or George Lucas would have been like, yo, you need to put an ixnay on using the term Dark Jedi. But yeah, I think if I had to choose, I'm going with a Dark Jedi. That's very much my personality. I don't have to adhere to a religious organization. I could just do my thing. I could be a badass across the galaxy. So yeah, I'm going with Dark Jedi. That's what I'm picking. Let me know in the comments. I would love to know, or in the chat, what would you pick? Would you rather be a Dark Jedi or a Sith? As I said, for me, I'm initially like, oh, bro, without question, a Sith. But the more I thought about it, I was like, yo, I think I'm going with the Dark Jedi. Piff Lewis, happy Valentine's Day, Dark Side. I completely forgot it was Valentine's Day. Thank the Force, thank the Maker, that my wife and I, our dating anniversary is pretty close to Valentine's Day. So we don't celebrate Valentine's Day because we just celebrate our dating anniversary, which is coming up soon. But yeah, happy Valentine's Day to all my lovebirds out there. All right. Moving on to our next question. Worms McCuddy asks, what's the deal with that clone assassin in the Bad Batch? Let's talk about that freaking clone. So Worms is referring to the assassin used by Vice Admiral Rampart to kill the clone Slip, as well as Senator Chuchi in the episode 7 in season 2 of the Bad Batch, the current season, right? And in that episode, after Slip is killed, after the assassin tries to kill Chuchi, Rex arrives. Rex helps capture this assassin before he can kill Chuchi. They tried to interrogate him and get as much information as they could from him. We don't learn a ton of information, but we do get at least some information from Rex about this clone. So we learn that the clone had no identification number. We're not sure if he even has a name. And Rex insists that the assassin is not a clone trooper, which, that when he said that, I'm like, well, what the hell does that mean? So the only thing about the assassin that the assassin says, I should say, is that before he murks himself, before he commits suicide using that like electrocution pill, he says that he's a believer. Then he takes a bite of that electrocution pill, zeroes himself. That's really all we know about this clone at this point, but I do think that there are a few theories, a few explanations as to what the deal is with this clone, what he could be doing, or I should say what he could be a part of. That's probably a better way to phrase it. I think there's a few possibilities. The Bad Batch, I love the Bad Batch, and I love that it's done a good job of dropping these little nuggets into other Star Wars content, other Star Wars stories. We just got the episodes, an episode like 2 or 3 episodes ago, where they're on that ancient freaking mech Nara Skull, which myself and a lot of people think that is a weapon or a machine created by the Zepho from the game Star Wars Fallen Order. In season 1, we get an episode that takes place on Bora Vio, which is a decommissioned Kaminoan cloning facility, which my thought was, hey, this is connecting us to the events of The Mandalorian. It's showing us how Sidious had been putting together a cloning program to create Force-sensitive clones for himself as early as potentially 19 BBY, but probably even before then. And so I say that because I think this assassin is going to be connecting us either to what we've already seen in, let's say, Rogue One or in The Mandalorian. And you'll understand what I mean as we go through this explanation a little bit more. My boy Star Wars Explained, Alex from Star Wars Explained, did an excellent video recently where he gave his theory about what this assassin is. And I think Alex is onto something. I think he's got a pretty good theory about this assassin. So essentially in Star Wars Explains videos, he talked about how he thinks this assassin could be an early phase of the Dark Trooper. So the Dark Trooper, we saw them in season 2 of The Mandalorian. So we saw them a few times in season 2, right? They were a third generation Dark Trooper at that point. So the Dark Troopers that we see in The Mandalorian at that point, they were essentially in like phase 3 of the Dark Trooper project. And those were the droids that we saw capture Grogu on Tython. Those were the droids. Din had to fight one. Luke wound up jacking up a bunch of them, right? When we see Din speaking to the Imperial Dr. Pershing in The Mandalorian, Pershing actually explained to Din that, hey, these are a third generation of this trooper. We cut out that weakness. And the earlier phases of this Dark Trooper essentially had people that were wearing like armor or were wearing mech suits. And so whether that's phase 0, 1, or 2, at some point by the third generation, the Empire had decided, hey, the weakness is humans. We got to get them out of the equation. And that's how we get those robot Dark Troopers in The Mandalorian. The Legends explanation or the Legends story for Dark Troopers is like way darker. It's pretty insane. So the original iteration of the Dark Trooper had aging clones being returned back to their peak condition by replacing up to 90% of their limbs and organs with cybernetics. And we've seen that in The Mandalorian. We saw Fennec Shand get shot a blaster bolt to the gut, and Boba saves her, and she gets basically her entire gut replaced. Her entire dietary tract is replaced, right? So we've kind of already seen that in canon, but in Legends, again, aging clones, they were returned to peak performance by having up to 70% of their limbs and organs replaced with cybernetics. And then the clones that were selected were forced into service. They had no choice, and many of them wound up murking themselves because of this. They did not want to do this, but they were forced, and because of that forced conscription, we'll say, they wound up freaking zeroing themselves. And that definitely seems like a plausible explanation to me that what we're seeing with that assassin could be the early stages of the Dark Trooper project, right? Because remember, this definitely seems like something the Empire would be all about. And to me, I think it seems plausible that maybe this assassin volunteered for his assignment and then was given enhancements by the Empire. Remember, we go back to season 1 of The Bad Batch. At the very end, we see our homegirl Nala Se. She's captured by the Empire, and Nala Se was the chief medical scientist of Kamino. She's captured by the Empire, and now she's being forced into service at Mount Tantus and brought to Mount Tantus. And Mount Tantus is very much an established place in Legends, and a lot of the crazy stuff that we see with some of these troopers takes place in Mount Tantus in Legends, which I think is pretty dope. I'm trying to remember, is Mount Tantus first appear in the Thrawn trilogy? I can't remember off the top of my head in Legends. But another possibility could be that this assassin could be the start of the Death Troopers. I talked about this last year when we got season 1 of The Bad Batch, that my thought was Crosshair, with what we're seeing happening with Crosshair in season 1 and even in season 2, is that we may be seeing the birth of the Death Troopers, and that Crosshair could very well be the first Death Trooper. So that was something that myself and a lot of others theorized, is that, hey, the Bad Batch is showing us the birth of the Death Troopers, especially because we're seeing, not only is Crosshair going out on these kind of like Black Ops missions for the Empire, but he's doing so with a squad of elite troopers. So yeah, I think that could also be another possibility. And to also add weight to that theory, Death Troopers were an elite variant of Stormtroopers, specializing in stealth, espionage, and lethality. They were subject to a battery of classified surgical enhancements that drastically enhanced their physical and mental attributes, such as strength, speed, agility, reflexes, and stamina, pushing their attributes such as basically beyond human levels, which that to me could absolutely be a possibility with that assassin. And the fact that the clone assassin told Rex that he's a believer makes me think that he could be someone that the Empire handpicked for whatever program he's going to be a part of. And that's because of the fact that our boy is a staunch believer of the Empire. That could mean that his staunch belief in the Empire made him an ideal candidate to be selected for as a subject for whatever experimental trooper program or squad that the Empire is cooking up at this point in time in the Star Wars timeline of 19 BBY. So in Legends, we saw covert clone troopers who were essentially elite clone troopers that were mainly assigned to perform dirty work. And that basically that dirty work was going out and you're going to assassinate and eliminate clone troopers who deserted the Republic military. And those covert ops clone troopers were given their orders directly from Palpatine. So now, while we know that, based on what Rex said, that the assassin is not a trooper, covert ops clone troopers are also not canon. That was something specifically in Legends. But that definitely aligns with what we saw happening in the Bad Batch this past week, or last week, I should say, at this point, right? Vice Admiral Rampart was kind of sort of doing this with Project War Mantle, albeit with conscripts rather than clones. So maybe Lucasfilm, Dave Filoni, they're saying, hey, let's kind of pull from what we saw in Legends, and we could put that into whether it's the Death Trooper program or Dark Trooper program. We can kind of combine some of that stuff and make this cool kind of story play out in the Bad Batch, which I could totally see being the case. And while we know that this assassin wasn't a clone trooper, as I mentioned, he could be a clone that's being used by the Empire to eliminate rogue clones. We've heard that multiple times throughout the season. Rampart mentioning clones that have gone AWOL from the Imperial military, or maybe he could be just a straight up assassin used by the Empire for covert Black Ops missions. I saw some people and some articles saying that, hey, maybe this dude is like a devotee of the Sith Eternal. We mentioned Sith Eternal earlier on in the live stream. We saw the Sith Eternal in The Rise of Skywalker. They're mentioned in the novel Shadow of the Empire. They're in Greg Pak's Darth Vader novel. Shadow of the Empire, Greg Pak's Darth Vader are excellent, and I like that the Sith Eternal are in those stories. Essentially, the Sith Eternal worked to make Darth Sidious's vision of a Sith Empire come to fruition. So basically, they were going to do whatever they could to make sure that Sidious's vision of a Sith Empire came to fruition, and they were fervent believers of the dark side. So they were basically a dark side cult that worshipped the Sith. That seems unlikely to me, that this assassin would be a part of the Sith Eternal. I don't think that's where we're going, and that's where the storytellers of the Bad Batch are going. Could be a possibility, but that to me seems very unlikely. I mean, our boy does say he's a believer before he murks himself, so I guess we can't say that is completely out of the realm of possibility, but I think the most plausible explanation is that Sidious and the Empire are working on utilizing clones, and they're trying to come up with some elite variant of troopers. We now know from last week the Imperial Stormtroopers are coming, right? So now these clones that are going to be phased out, the Empire is going to, they won't technically have need for them, but they could start to use them in other ways. They could use them to potentially do covert and black op missions. So maybe assassinating senators like we saw this past week, assassinating other clones, subversives, or others that they deemed as a threat to the Empire. So my thought is that what we're seeing with this clone, personally, I think he is an early Death Trooper. That's my thought, is that this dude is one of the first beings, or clones I should say, that's going to wind up becoming the Death Troopers. That's my thought. It could very well be that he's one of the phase 0 or the early phases of the Dark Trooper, but my thought is our homeboy was a Death Trooper, because I think that would be so sick if we got to see that connection to Rogue One, and we got to see that, bro, Crosshair was the basically the starting point of the Death Trooper program. He was one of the first Death Troopers. That would be kind of like, yo, that's on one hand is sick, but at the same hand, like I've mentioned this before, I'm a big fan of Crosshair. Like that would be such a bummer if, like, man, our boy was one of the first Death Troopers, but it would still be sick to see. Sonia, welcome to the chat. Happy Valentine's Day. All right. Moving on to our next question. Our boy Isaac R asks, did Maul have a crush? As far as we know, Maul's obsession prevented him from having any sort of romantic feelings or relationships, right? So first, our dude was Sidious's apprentice, and basically he was wrought with hatred and vitriol for the Jedi. And that prevented him from basically focusing on anything outside of doing Darth Sidious's bidding. Our boy was all about placating Sidious's wishes and doing whatever his master bid him to do. Then once Obi-Wan cut him in half and Sidious cast Maul aside, Maul's obsession transitioned from Darth Sidious and overthrowing the Empire to getting revenge on Obi-Wan. In that obsession, we see him in the Clone Wars. He goes down a dark path of madness, basically, in the years that he's just withering away on Lothal Minor. And he's being eaten up by that obsession with his hatred for Obi-Wan and wanting that vengeance against Obi-Wan. So he never, in his mind, at this point, as far as I can tell, had any interest in anything outside of initially doing Sidious's wishes and bidding, and then getting vengeance on Obi-Wan, which is sad. You know, outside of, like, I guess his brother, Savage Opress, and Mother Talzin, Maul had no one in his life that he cared for, or anyone that cared about him. But that's the whole point, right? That's the point that Darth, I was going to say Darth Lucas. That's the point that George Lucas and now the writers at Lucasfilm are trying to make with dark-side users, with the Sith, right? Their devotion to power, their devotion to greed and malice and gluttony. All of those are slippery slopes to being unhappy, being alone, being miserable. Look at Darth Vader. Our dude is freaking miserable. And when I was talking about this with Danielle, imagine if these dudes just clapped some cheeks. Imagine if Darth Maul, Darth Sidious, even Vader, if they just clapped some cheeks, they got some buns, the galaxy would probably be a better place. If they maybe just got even a side piece, right? To be able to focus their energy on anything but the dark side. Maybe the galaxy would be a little bit different, right? Get Sidious a girlfriend or a wife or something, right? Because then maybe the galaxy would be way different. I don't think any of the dark side Force users that we see in Star Wars have any relationships, meaningful relationships with anyone. At least not that I can think of. They all are essentially almost like, how do I want to say this? Basically they use one another. That's the best way to say it, right? Sidious uses Vader. Sidious used Tyrannus, Maul to get what he wanted. He uses everyone to get what he wants, and damn everyone else as long as he gets what he wants. So it makes sense to me that these individuals would have no meaningful relationships with anyone, Maul included, which is so sad. I did one of my first videos that I ever did for the YouTube channel. I should go back and watch it and see how bad it is now. But one of the first videos that I did was this video essay basically of talking about how Darth Maul is a representation of, or a retelling or a reimagining, I should say, of Sisyphus. Sisyphus, Greek, I think, mythology. In Greek mythology, Sisyphus is this individual that he wound up evading death by like tricking, was it Hades? I can't remember the god of death in Greek mythology, but he tricks the god of death. He's able to break free from Hades, goes back, and then he gets captured or is killed again. I can't remember the exact story of Sisyphus. And because of his crimes, Sisyphus has to roll a boulder up a hill, only for it, right as he gets to the top of that hill, for the boulder to fall right back down. And he's damned to do that for eternity, never succeeding in his task. That is Darth Maul. Think about Darth Maul's story, where we see him when we first are introduced to him in The Phantom Menace to where we most recently get to see him. And we're going to exclude Solo for right now because we don't know what happens to Maul. We do know what happens to Maul after that, but as far as where the immediate aftermath of that, we don't know exactly. But where we see him in The Phantom Menace, he fails. In the Clone Wars, pretty much all of his machinations and scheming and plotting fails. We see him in Solo, but then we fast forward to Rebels. All the things that he's doing in Rebels, he eventually fails, and he winds up, his lust for revenge and that need for revenge winds up killing him because Obi-Wan jacks him up. Darth Maul or Maul is just a retelling or a reimagining of Sisyphus, and I love that. I love that George Lucas did that. There's a lot of archetypes that George Lucas took and pulled from Greek mythology in Star Wars. I love that George Lucas did that, and I think that's why Star Wars resonates with so many people. The mythology and the lore of Greek mythology is dope, and there's a reason why those stories are still appreciated to this day, because they're cool. I think a lot of us, when I was in, I think it was middle school or maybe early high school, that I learned about like Greek mythology. I remember that was like one of my favorite things to learn about, because like, this is so dope. This is so sick learning about this stuff. And it makes sense that Lucas would pull from Greek mythology in creating some of these characters and using archetypes that are basically tried and true archetypes for storytelling. And I think that's a one of many reasons why people love Star Wars so much. But yeah, basically in a nutshell, Darth Maul or Maul didn't have any crush, at least as far as we know. But get our boy some buns. Get our boy some booty cheeks. Get Sidious some booty cheeks. What's Sidious doing on the Death Star and in the Sith Temple, or I should say the Sith Shrine on Coruscant? Our boy's just trying to figure out how to live immortal. Bro, go slap some cheeks, man. Get some buns. Damn. But that's a good place to leave it off, especially on Valentine's Day. I hope all of you out there are getting some buns. I hope Sidious and Maul aren't the only ones that I'm wishing getting some buns. I hope you guys are as well. But that's a good spot to leave it off, me talking about you guys getting some buns. What are your thoughts on any of the questions that we discussed? Do you think my answers are kooky or stupid? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know down in the comments. I love hearing from you guys. I love knowing what your thoughts are. So let me know down in the comments what you're thinking. I love doing the Q&A. I love getting these questions. I love working on these questions and thinking about them. Like I said, the question about, would you rather be a dark Jedi or a Sith? That was when I was like, yo, no question, I'm going to be a Sith. But the more I started thinking about it, like, yo, dark Jedi might be kind of cool. And that's what I love about the Q&A. I love that you guys get me thinking about Star Wars in a way that I might not have thought about Star Wars otherwise. So I love getting questions from you guys. I love doing the Q&A. These are going to continue to be a weekly thing. We've got more Bad Batch coming. We've got freaking Mandalorian coming in now, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Not 3 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks from tomorrow. Cannot wait for Mandalorian premiere. That's going to be so sick. And guys, I think, I'm not 100% sure, but I think we're going to be getting the Mandalorian and the Bad Batch on the same day, which, holy crap, that's going to be dope. So keep a lookout for live streams breaking down the Bad Batch. Got shorts that we release, starting to get back into releasing videos. So you may start to see, you're probably going to start seeing those more frequently. So keep an eye out for those. But again, let me know your thoughts on any of these questions, on any of these answers down in the comments. Again, I love hearing from you guys. I love getting your thoughts and seeing how you guys would answer some of these questions. Always fun. If you have not, now's a good time, you jabroni. Like this video, subscribe to Star Wars Transmissions. Help me make this channel freaking blow up so I could keep making content for you guys. Help support the channel. It's always appreciated when you do. If you have TikTok, follow us on TikTok. I post on TikTok as well. So SW Transmissions, you could follow me on there and also make fun of me, comment on my videos, whatever you want to say in some of my videos. Feel free to do so, but give us a follow on TikTok because that would be super appreciated. With that said, my friends, I'm going to get ready to go frickin' hang out with Danny Girl because it is Valentine's Day. I hope you guys have a great Valentine's Day. May the Force be with you and stay nerdy.